Upgrades are one of the most important steps in the Anno series, and without upgrading your buildings, you're basically stuck in the first part of the game. And in the last video, we talked about roads and warehouses, so if you were interested in how that actually affects your city, check that video out, it's on my channel. And in this one, in part 2, we talk about the most important upgrade in this game, and that is upgrading your residents, aka your population. Now, the biggest part here is always, when should you upgrade? Because I see a lot of people who are just upgrading whenever they can, right? When they need some new people in a certain workforce, and then they're just upgrading the houses they can upgrade right now to fill out their workforce. And I understand that that is sometimes necessary, but especially when it isn't, this can lead to a lot of issues down the road. So, before we go into more detail about those issues, let's talk about the groundwork here, because I think there's a lot of stuff people forget or don't actually know about, and I want to make this clear to give you a better understanding on how this whole upgrading works. So the first one is pretty simple, right? You probably already know this one, but I want to mention it regardless. Whenever you are upgrading a workforce to the next tier, they will lose all their abilities of the previous tier. So let's say I'm upgrading the Libertus to plebeians, then they would not be able anymore to work on farms which need plebeians or Libertus, right? Or whatever tier you are upgrading to. You cannot use them anymore, which means what a lot of people do is when they have upgraded a house, they will immediately build another house, right? It's like, oh, I upgraded this house. Well, that means I have just lost some Libertus workforce. I better build some tier 1 houses again. The problem is, this is a cycle you're starting, and the cycle is basically upgrade, building new houses, upgrade, building new houses, and that will lead to a lot of resource issues. Now you might say, but why? That leads us immediately to the second point. Even though when you are upgrading a house to the next higher tier, and the people in that house are losing the ability to work at the previous workplace, right? They still demand all the resources of the previous tier. Yes, that means that even patricians do want their sardines, they want their porridge, they want their bread, and so on and so forth. So that means you just not have to give them new resources they demand, they also still want all the other old resources, and you can kind of already see where the cycle is beginning, because that means that the new upgraded houses need still the old resources you have been producing, you are putting down new houses, and they also need new resources. And you will run at some point into a wall that basically you are not producing enough resources anymore for the upgraded tiers and the new houses, and then you are running into trouble. But we will get into detail about that a little bit later on. Let's still continue to talk about the groundwork here, the nodes. The next thing you have to know is when you are upgrading a house, you don't need all the needs fulfilled in all categories. So you can see that right here, right? I could upgrade the Equus residents to the patricians, and because I have fulfilled all the 5 needs, well, they need, right? But in that category itself, you don't necessarily have to fulfill all the needs. Let me show you that very quickly here with a house over here. You can see I'm still technically missing 1 need, which is a marvel. So I would have to build something here in the close vicinity. But you can also see this here with the public services. I have fulfilled the need for the public services, but you see that they do not have access to the Grammaticus, right? That is out of range, but it is still fulfilled because you can see that there is a current and a required of the needs. As long as you get all the needs they require, it's not a problem. So how do you do that? Well, the answer is overproduction. So you can see it here right now with the fashion, right? I have a current of 11.6 and I have a required of 7 points. And I have achieved that by overproducing certain resources I have easy access to. And then that did count as fulfilling that need. If this is especially helpful if you don't want to use Albion, right? I made a video actually here on this channel, if you want to check it out, how you can play this game without having to go to Albion at all and just playing on Latium, right? So make sure to check that out. But this is how you can upgrade your houses without having to fulfill all the needs. You just have to overproduce in certain categories, and then you are good. Another thing we have to mention, and this is the last point of some of the groundwork we have to cover here, and that is whenever you are upgrading a house, the number goes up, right? The workforce number goes up, and more importantly, the population goes up. You are starting out with a relatively low population, and you can see here the moment I upgraded, the population is going up. Now, what is important to note, that not every population you are getting with the upgrade is actually workforce. You can see that out of the, I think, 20 people which will live in here, or 15 people, I don't know exactly the number, but I think it's 20. I have only 4 people who will then go into the workforce pool. Now, the problem here is, though, that even though that those people are not actively in my workforce, they still exist, right? They are elderly who are living here, kids and other people who do not work, and they still exist on their island, and they will still participate in certain events and certain stats on this island. So just upgrading houses over and over can lead to multiple issues. Let's finally talk about those issues, shall we? The first one, as I already said, is production. Whenever you are activating the cycle of upgrading your houses, building new houses, that means you need more production, right? Because you will realize, oh shoot, I'm not producing enough to give them their needs, which means I need more production, which means you need more workforce, which means you have to upgrade your houses and you have to build new houses. And you can see how the cycle continues and how this is becoming more and more of an issue. So the question is, what do you do about that? Grow slowly is the answer. Make sure that you really need that upgrade. You really want that particular workforce, because it's not just that you are going into the cycle of building more and more. There's also the problem of space. You have only a limited amount of space on your main island, and if you want to build a big city, well, you do have to have a lot of space, but you also need space for your production buildings, right? And so what will happen is that at some point you might have space issues. Like you can see right here, I had to, or I wanted to build the amphitheater, and I was running out of space in my main hub area, so I had to build it over here. And space is something you cannot just overproduce. You have to go to other islands and so on and so forth. So be careful with upgrading and building new houses. Okay, so when should I upgrade then? In my honest opinion, it's a lot of like a gut feeling and how much resources and workers you have. There is no fixed number, but what I always recommend when it comes to upgrade buildings is that you at least upgrade one building to the next tier so that you are unlocking some of the buildings and the production buildings for your next tier, right? Like at least upgrade one building. And we will talk about that a little bit, why that is so important in just a second here. But the next thing I want to talk about is, you remember that I talked about the people who are living in your houses and who are being counted towards your population, but not to your workforce. Those can become a huge problem because every time you reach a population milestone, you can see that right here, you will end up with a bigger city status. And you can see that my city has now reached population status 9, and this gives a lot of effects per residence, right? Yes, I do get belief, I do get knowledge, and I get prestige. But you can also see that happiness, health, and fire safety is far more affected by the negative effects than I'm gaining positive effects from this. And that is a huge problem. At some point, I kid you not, I had minus 1,500 island fire safety because I had too much population and I didn't have unlocked the aqueducts yet. Because you only get the aqueducts with tier 3, right? And I didn't have that yet. So I had fire stations all over the city. Like in every corner, there was a fire station covering the houses. I was done. I couldn't build more fire station and I was still at minus 1,500. Then I started to upgrade to tier 3, thankfully, right? And I could build the aqueducts, and the aqueducts helped me a big deal to fight that fire safety. So that is also a problem when you are upgrading your city. Don't overdo it, because the debuffs you are getting will outweigh the buffs easily, and you're not just running into resource issues, you are now also running into attribute issues, and you will have to fight with, well, the fire and with sicknesses and of course with population uprisings. You don't want that, so be careful that you can actually keep up with your stats, right? But as I said before, definitely make sure that you always upgrade at least to the next tier. Not only that you can also get the production chain for the next resource, but also get some of the buildings you might need to help you out, right? And if you are taking it slow and you're making sure that all the other stats like production and attributes can actually follow, you should be good. And then you don't have to fix many of the issues when they become a real problem. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like. Also, if you still have some questions or ideas yourself, let me know down below in the comments. And if you're new to the channel, you want to see more Anno videos, or, well, also strategy games, which is what we are focusing on here on the channel, I would appreciate if you subscribe. With that said, have a good one. Stay safe. Bye-bye.